That's not the actual rank. And if you create this ranking system and then you're manipulating it, like what is the point of the rank?
That's what's crazy.
And
so
the thing is a lot of these areas, policy is really what raised the cost of living. So it's almost like they raised the cost of living, and now they're using tax dollars to pay for the cost of living for the government employees.
Welcome to Loans Elevated, the podcast that brings you the latest industry news, expert interviews, and insightful discussions that will help you stay ahead in this dynamic market. I'm your host, Broch Lassig, and I've spent years in the trenches of the mortgage industry, helping individuals and businesses navigate the complex landscape of real estate financing.
I'm your co-host, TJ Heidenreich, and together we'll cover a wide range of topics, from business strategies that skyrocket your success to mindset and motivation that fuel your growth.
All right, so we're into Trump 2.0, as they call it. We're past the inauguration. We're past the election. We're past all the crap, which I'm actually happy about.
Oh, yeah.
Because last year, 2024, seemed like a perpetual waiting game of, I'm going to wait for house prices to fall or rates to fall, neither of which happened. Rates actually now are higher than they were a year ago, and home prices are certainly higher than they were a year ago and going up. But then what happened next when people realized by second quarter that wasn't going to happen? Well, I'm going to wait until the election.
Yeah.
And then, well, I'm going to wait till the holidays. And I'm going to wait till the inauguration.
Wait till election. And
I want to see what Trump does.
I'm worried about how that impacts interest rates, so I got to wait a little longer.
It was a full-blown waiting game. So first and foremost, I'm excited that we are past it all and actually moving forward into somewhat of a normalized market. People have swallowed the pill of rates. They've swallowed the pill of the politics, swallowed the pill that if you want to buy real estate, just buy it because it's not going down. There's not going to be a huge fire sale of real estate. It's just not reasonable.
Yeah, definitely more people in prior years.
Yeah. So now let's think through, like, what are the high-level topics, what are the prominent things that you can imagine that Trump 2.0 administration, how that might impact housing?
First things first, the biggest thing that I had started to hear from people was because I guess a lot of the big media news channels were talking about this, is the tariffs and the implementation of those and the upward pressure on inflation that can cause, which is we obviously know is bad for mortgage rates.
Right.
So a lot of the housing nerds were like, okay, this could not be good. Like maybe we're not going to see interest rates come down. And I mean, my thought on it is I think in the long term it's a good play. Like, I mean, bottom line is we need more revenue.
Forget about thoughts on it, bro. Look at what's happening right now. So everyone was tripping out, like you said, about these tariffs. And, oh, my gosh, it's going to create massive inflation. There was study after study after study how it's a bad idea. I agree. Maybe it's probably a decent idea, like you just said. But he's in office now, and there are no tariffs.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say.
He's a master negotiator for the benefit of whatever he's serving, whether it's his company and, in this case, the country. He's a freaking master negotiator. He knows how to freak out his counterparts, people he's negotiating against, freak out the economy to get everybody's attention. But he's playing chess is what I feel like is happening.
Whether he implements them or not, there's going to be some sort of ripple effect.
And he will implement them, but he's just kind of like navigating this negotiation. Like he's paused the discussion of tariffs against China. Why? He's already said multiple times since the inauguration that he's been on the phone with President Xi Jinping multiple times. The negotiations have already started out of fear of what would happen if he implemented these tariffs. So it's just a threat, and it's going to have a positive impact.
And that's what I was going to full circle back to is it was never intended on being implemented day one. Because, I mean, the thing is he's smart and realized that or at least the U.S. is not in a position to be able to take over all that production overnight. And if it was implemented day one, then yeah, for sure we would see like a pretty big spike in prices across the front, and that would bring up inflation. But it's not, as we can see, it's not really panning out that way.
I just think he's a good bluffer, and he's got a good poker face. And because even Musk, when he was threatening them in the beginning, he's like, I hope he doesn't implement them because if he does, it's going to crush the economy. We can't sustain it, just like you're saying.
Right.
So there's people in his corner saying that, but
what I'm saying is we knew that it wasn't going to be implemented day one. And that's a big thing. So that didn't turn out to be what it was thought to be, which was an obstacle for a lot of people. they started to hear that. They're like, well, now we need to wait and see what happens when Trump gets in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So far, I mean, if anything, so far rates have
they've actually improved a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, since the inauguration, which is crazy because last time he got voted in, it was outrageous. Rates spiked like 0.75 of a point the day he got elected before inauguration. It was nuts.
Yeah.
So much more peaceful this time, which is good. What else is on your mind?
My other thought is government jobs and the I guess implementation and the creation of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and where they have announced they're starting first is the government sector. And maybe we all haven't known this, but some people have realized, us looking at the job market last year and seeing the jobs reports and seeing how much of the job creations were coming from the government sector. It's like, where the hell are these jobs coming from?
Right. Where are all the government workers?
You're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is going to impact the unemployment rate more significantly than I think people are realizing.
Yeah.
Because if most of those job creations, quote unquote, came from the government sector, I would imagine over the last years, the ones that were created will probably be gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at
For
least
sure.
significantly reduced.
Right.
And if it was 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60% of the job report in the growth numbers,
Yeah.
now you
Right.
claw that back, plus any negative revisions with that QCEW coming up on the 5th,
Yeah.
it could be a full flip on its head.
Yeah.
Like we could see the unemployment rate spike like crazy.
Exactly. Which the Fed's not expecting. And if we see that data come, like rates will immediately improve just because of that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a weakening economy. So do we really want that? That's the crazy thing about mortgage rates right now is a weakening economy is the only thing that's going to get mortgage rates to come down. So it's either higher unemployment or slower economic growth, which means
It's kind of like we're cheering for a bad thing.
right to get lower rates. So it's like, do we just take the rates we have now and keep things sustained? Or I think we're too far gone, and I think we are going to hit higher unemployment. We are going to hit the recession. But, you think about Musk is, it's crazy. I don't know what the story is, but Vivek Ramaswamy is no longer part of the DOGE committee, which I thought was weird.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's what I've heard, is he's not part of it. Musk is heading it up, and that's been affirmed since the inauguration. And you think about Musk's process in business. His process and methodology in business is rip it all out. Take everything away, and only the things you need will present themselves as problems, and then you know what you need to go hire for. So he's like an extremest when it comes. Now, I mean, he's a
route, but
it is an aggressive route. But look at his companies; they're some of the most valuable.
Well, and I
companies in
think
the world.
look at the circumstances we're in. I mean, we're in extreme circumstances. You need extreme measures.
Well, and we are in unchecked circumstances. Like it has been so long that the government has not been able to account for its budget. Like departments within the government cannot even balance they can't tell the government where their money went.
Yeah.
Like what in the hell?
Well, and our tax dollars don't even cover the interest bill that is being accrued on our deficit.
Yeah.
And
it's got to be...
There's no end without any change.
That's right.
We will default.
Dramatic change that needs to happen. And hopefully this is the beginning of it. It's a little bit scary to think about. Plus, we have AI, which Trump is a massive proponent of. And I think it's just a tsunami coming at us that you have to either engage with or you will get lost in the water. You'll get eaten up by the tsunami. He's a massive proponent of it. Signed an executive order, I think it was yesterday, that essentially puts things in place to ensure that we are the leaders in AI. So it's like you think AI is creating efficiencies and likely in the short term eliminating some jobs as we know them today.
Yeah.
It'll create some others. And then they're going to strip down the government. And like there's a lot of crazy things that are happening.
Yeah.
All of which could lead to higher unemployment, which could lead to lower mortgage rates. I think the shortage in housing, which we have 1 million less houses today available than we had over, I think it was from 2000 to 2019. So a 19-year or 20-year period, the average housing supply, we are 1 million units underneath that right now. Yeah. So I think housing prices are supported long-term no matter what happens. some of these things could pull rates down, but what do they do to the consumers? Like, how do they, like, the scary thing is, how do they live? Because the rates are going to come down due to pain of families.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, by no means are we cheering for people. Like, we have that perspective. We had that conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you even choose the right stance on this? Because you know it needs to happen for the economy to be in a better spot in the long term. But how do you not? Yeah, exactly. How do you not feel terrible cheering for people to actually lose their jobs? It's awful. It's definitely going to be it's going to be a big deal.
Well, and you talked to a buddy the other day who was talking to you about something within the military.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Like, there was like crazy stuff happening that even people, just regular workers in the military, are aware of, and everyone is like panicked right now.
Yeah. Well, because I'm not 100% familiar with it, but how government pay works is you're on different levels or different ranks.
Yeah.
And basically what they were doing was
military ranks.
Yeah, they were adjusting ranks. They were actually taking people's ranks higher in certain geographical areas to make up for quote unquote cost of living. Yeah. And it's like, how is that not? That's got to be illegal.
Oh yeah,
because you're manipulating pay. That's not the actual rank. And if you create this ranking system, but then you're manipulating it, like what is the point of the rank?
That's what's crazy.
And so the thing is a lot of these areas, policy is really what raised the cost of living. So it's almost like they raised the cost of living, and now they're using tax dollars to pay for the cost of living for the government employees.
Right. Right, which is nuts.
Yeah. And that type of stuff is, or who knows the level.
So to make that clear, the military rankings, like GS, 1 through I think 15 are the rankings. I think that's right. Basically what you learned was somebody could have earned a rank of GS 8, but they got a theoretical increase to their ranking to GS 12, for example, and received the corresponding wage for that, which is like, that's wild. Like, my father-in-law was in the military, active duty for years, and then civilian for like 30 years. And after probably 35 years of service to the country, whether it was active or civilian, working for the Air Force, after 35 years or something like that, he retired with a GS 14, one from the top. So he was way up there. But you think these people that have not even earned, they've maybe earned a GS 8, are getting paid 2 grades below. Like, that's like, it's pretty unfair. But the issue is people within the government are aware of this, and they knew it was happening all along, and everyone was just kind of like, well, I just got to keep living my life. And now people are freaking out. Yeah.
Well, it's like it's self-inflicted pain.
Right.
It should have never gotten to this point.
Yeah.
The overspending is the problem. Like, that's the reason why we have high interest rates. It's overspending.
Right. Yeah.
And so, we've talked about this for 3 years now. It's going to be pain to get us back on a better track. But the only reason we have to go through that pain is because the problem was started in the first place. That could have been avoided.
Yeah. Now,
if there's no checks and balances,
right,
things get out of hand.
Yeah. It's the come to Jesus moment right now.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Right.
For the U.S. government and workers because of Doge, which is crazy. Something we've never seen. I guess there was a time, I think back like in the 80s, that we saw something similar, but nothing this significant. One good thing though is turning on the pipelines, and now, granted, for the environment, maybe there's questions on if this is the right move, but it is a positive thing for households and for mortgage rates, and therefore for housing in general, is if energy costs go down, fuel, natural gas, all these things that we can now generate, and is a huge push by the Trump administration, inflation's going to come down, and inflation comes down, mortgage rates keep falling, and families can afford more housing, and they can invest in housing and grow wealth. Like, that's a huge positive, I think, which is cool.
Yeah, outside of rates being the baseline of the economy, it's also energy.
Right.
If you bring energy costs down, everything else comes down in costs, or mostly everything.
Yeah. all the goods we buy because the fuel's cheaper for the trucks to be ran. And yeah, the costs to run the warehouses and heat and cool the warehouses and all the facilities, like everything becomes way cheaper, which is awesome. I guess we were talking about that. The other thing in the government and in the military is hiring freezes. Your buddy that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Basically, they immediately laid off the entire DEI. Everything diversity, equity, and inclusion related has been terminated in the U.S. government.
They already cut a department, and they've paused all hiring in government sector.
All hiring, period.
Yeah.
But they already eliminated all the people that had anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, including the crazy thing is, which we were talking about this, I think, before we started filming, which is, I didn't even know about this, but there was a rule called affirmatively furthering fair housing. And from a social standpoint, obviously these things are important. But from a federal standpoint, how much stance should they have and how much should tax dollars go to fund these initiatives where there's no proof of efficacy in making any positive social change, right? It's not proven at all. In fact, it might have created more social upheaval over the past several years. But there was a federal administration in charge of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in housing and real estate. That's gone. Like there's things that I didn't even know existed that are they were eliminated.
Well, yeah. And now they're also talking about like a full-blown countrywide audit of all government jobs.
That's what's happening right now. That's why hiring freezes are.
Yeah, because they want to put all forces towards actually auditing each position, each sector of or I guess each mini sector within the government sector.
Well, I think with DOGE, the government cannot, I think there's some minor exceptions, but by and large, the government cannot hire a single person until this entire audit is complete.
Right. Which now basically puts these government employers under the heat of essentially defending their jobs.
Yeah.
And, okay, let's say some of them have justified keeping the role and not entirely losing it. At what level do they get their pay cut?
Exactly.
Which is another role.
Because how do you justify? Yeah. I mean, because it's so widespread. Well, and the executive order that all federal employees have to be back in the office immediately.
Yeah.
No more work from home with federal employees. Like, these are
crazy
enormous changes that took place that are going to have serious implications over time. You know, one other thing, I think it was gosh dang it, I forgot. I think it was the World Economic Forum or Davos. Yeah, I think that's what it was. That Trump came in like through Zoom to meet with the other leading nations of the world. And he basically, you know, going back to the idea of how he's this negotiator in ways that, you know, he says things that implicate certain actions to be taken, but what does it really mean? I think that's an interesting thing that I think is effective in his ability to negotiate on behalf of the American people, but also part of what makes people really half the country not like him. But he basically said interest rates have to come down. They will come down. We will force them down, and the entire world should follow. Like, just those types of statements and power moves, like
all the investors are just scramming right now.
Exactly. Like, what does that do to the psychology of the bond traders and all these markets? It's like, holy crap, what is he going to do from an executive action standpoint or some other type of standpoint that will impact the investments they have? So does that make them more skittish?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Big deal.
It's interesting. So we'll see. But there are several initiatives that are designed also specifically to support housing affordability, availability of land, efficiency of getting building permits, and the ability to build housing more efficiently and cheaper, for that matter, because it's way expensive when the builders have to sit on capital for longer. The cost of the house becomes more expensive when they have to pay more for permits because there's all of these boxes that need to be checked, that many of them are unnecessary. We're in the business. I've developed property, and it's kind of ridiculous. Like, it takes an obscene amount of time, and it's ridiculous. Some things are going to be implemented there. All these things begin to cut the cost of housing, and there's several initiatives like that which I think are powerful. But
yeah, well, and the Fannie and Freddie thing potentially going
privatization.
private.
Yeah.
I
He's a
think
huge proponent of that.
Yeah,
Huge.
and I think they play a role within each other, because if we're going to make it easier, and this everyone needs to listen up to this, because everyone is asking for cheaper cost, make housing more affordable. I think in order to accomplish that, a lot of people aren't going to like the answer, but I think supply going up and making it easier to add supply, but then privatizing companies or these government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
yeah.
It's going to be more difficult. They're going to tighten up as far as qualifications and guidelines. Now,
well, it goes into the private network. There's no longer the backing of the unlimited printing of U.S. dollars. They have to actually...
So they have to take a little bit more calculated risk.
Right. Well, and the crazy thing is we learned this, and we actually covered this here on the podcast, where there were changes that were instigated by the previous administration to support these affordable housing initiatives and some of these things that we've been talking about, where first-time homebuyers with less money down and lower credit scores had better interest rates than a move-up homebuyer putting 30% down, for example.
Yeah.
Like everything
It's
was
crazy
not
stuff like that.
It was a
backwards.
good thought. Like you do want to help make it more affordable for first-time homebuyers, but from a take the social altruistic component completely away, and let's just peel it back and say, all right, there's a business. Does a business make decisions to charge the more risky investment less or more? The more risky investment, you earn
Always.
more. You don't earn less.
Always. Right.
Always. And it's like some of these changes, like that's the stuff that will be
and in the long term, it's going to help with affordability. But I think in the
You're
short
saying
term,
because it will...
It's going to limit the buyer pool.
Yeah, exactly. It will. So there's some things that are happening to increase supply of housing, but then demand is going to drop because of some of these potential
And I'm not
changes.
saying it's going to tank prices by any means, but...
It'll just balance the market.
Exactly.
A little bit easier, yeah. That's interesting. Anything else?
No, I think that's a lot of the stuff that I had thought of.
Yeah. Well, what we'll say is we're paying attention to this with as keen and neutral of an eye as we can possibly have, so that we can understand to guide our clients and hopefully share insights with you guys on what in the world is happening and how is it potentially going to impact housing. So this was a bit of a broad shotgun of like, this is all that's happened. And that's because we're a few days into this inauguration and there's been like 100 executive orders and all sorts of crazy stuff happening. It's nuts. Yeah. So we're trying to gather it all and figure out what the implications are to real estate. We'll continue these efforts. But if you have any specific questions, even if you have thoughts or contention points or ideas or any sort of conversation starters or arguments against or for what we talked about today, we would love to hear it, because we just want to, it'll help kind of point us in a direction of thought process and how to analyze all this stuff. But anyway, thanks for tuning in.
Sweet.
Thank you for tuning in. For more industry insights, follow us on all platforms at Loans Elevated.
And to get in touch with our team, call or text 801-713-4000 or visit loanselevated.com.